is coming up at 30 past the hour. Joining us right now, though, is R. Davis Younts, YountsLaw.com. Good morning to you, R. Davis.
Hey, good morning, brother. Good to talk to you.
Praise be to God. It's good to see you. You're always looking good as usual. A lot of stories in the news recently. I was following your tweets very closely about this, and it seems like there's some conflicting stories in regards to military mandates in vaccines. They got overturned. People got kicked out. What happens to them? And yet I saw another story that said, well, some people are still going to have to get this shot no matter what they do. So I thought, let's get you on and let's talk about this. Where does American men and women in our military services stand when it comes to military mandates?
Well, that's really the problem with this whole situation we're in now is the mandate was overturned by Congress. So Congress acted, it forced the Department of Defense's hand, really forced the Department of Defense to follow the law. The problem is the DOD, with all the political decisions that were made going into this, really hasn't changed mindset. So the mindset of the DOD is they still want 100% of the military force to be vaccinated. That's what they want. That's what they're pushing for. So what we see is there's policy, there's what the law requires, but behind the scenes, there's every effort being made to make it extremely difficult for military members to remain unvaccinated, regardless if it's for medical or religious reasons. They're still going to make that extremely, extremely difficult. That's for the folks that are still serving.
Wow. So let me ask you a question. How many service members didn't get the shot and weren't discharged? Like maybe they were caught in limbo? They were about to be processed out? How many people are we talking about in that category?
Again, those numbers, the DOD has really been hesitant to give us those numbers, so we have to estimate. What we do know is the last solid numbers we had from the DOD was there were 250,000 who were not fully vaccinated by the deadlines. Those were people that were in some form of an exemption or accommodation process at that point. 12,000 were kicked out. So the delta is somewhere between that number. So there are a lot. There are a lot that held out. Regardless of what the numbers look like, you're still talking between 30 and 40,000 that were somewhere in that stage of the process across the total force. So those are the individuals that I'm still worried about. You know, we have some clients that are going back to, Navy SEALs are going back to teams. They're getting spun up. At the same time, last week, we see news that for some deployments, you're going to have to get vaccinated. So again, there's this inconsistency that we're seeing internally to what the DOD is doing.
And so these service members get to go back to their jobs. Okay, but I also saw that you were very concerned that they may not get, considered for promotions. This may still work against them, even though they get to go back to work. Do they get promoted? Do they get, any other sort of awards or compensations that their other members would get because they got the shot?
Right. And we'll just start with someone who, let's just use an example of someone who filed a religious accommodation request. So I have a client in 06, so a colonel in the Air Force who was a commander. She was removed from her command position after filing a religious accommodation for the vaccine. So she got her first command position, critical for her career, was removed for that command position, and then spent essentially 18 months plus in limbo, not doing a command position. Her career is done because she filed a religious accommodation for no other reason. She followed the law. She filed a religious accommodation. The process wasn't even complete when she was fired in a command position. And again, people need to understand when you're removed from a command position like that, it's because the Air Force has lost faith and confidence in your ability to command. They lost faith and confidence in her ability to command because she submitted a religious accommodation. No other reason, no other purpose in doing that. So individuals like that all across the ranks, they've missed opportunities to be promoted. They've missed opportunities for training. They've missed opportunities for leadership positions that would set them up to be promoted. So they've lost 2 years because of their religious faith, those that have stayed in. And I have many, many clients like that. So nothing is perfect in a fallen world. I understand that. But these individuals, it's going to take years, if ever, to try to fix their records through the Board of Corrections process and otherwise. And those are the ones that were allowed to continue serving. So it's still a huge problem. And there's still a lot of animosity towards those individuals and a lot of mistreatment and retaliation that we see continuing.
Wow. I was thinking for a second there as you're talking about this particular officer who's being relieved of her command because of a religious exemption filing. Would they have prosecuted George Washington at this point? If you because he was a very religious man, spoke often of his religious belief in writing, and I don't know that he would be able to keep command these days. I think he probably would be shown the door.
Well, that's it's just so difficult for people of faith, for Christians in the military today, as we navigate everything that's happened over the few years. The COVID vaccine just accelerated some of the controversy. But the reality is there are faiths that are not accepted in the military. Traditional orthodoxy is not accepted in the military. And we see it everywhere. We see it not just with the vaccine, we see it with pronouns and emails, right? There's this push. If you don't put your pronoun in your email, then you're sending a signal that you're not on board with what's happening. It's not mandated yet, but those things keep coming unless we see significant change. So that's where we have to be very careful. We have to try to ensure that we see Christians know how to take a stand in the military, know how to do things well, know how to share their faith correctly, and know how to live out their values and their faith within the military environment. That's always been a challenge in the military. The difference is there's open hostility today, it seems, to traditional Christians.
You and I have talked about this in the past, but I'd like you to bring it up again. I don't know that I can any more recommend to a service in the military to young people who aren't eyes wide open going straight into it. Like anytime I meet a young person who says, because I served in the Marine Corps, you served in the Marine Corps, and I talk about my military service and my time, and even in my time, every command I served in, licentious behavior was an encouraged thing from the top down, at least on the enlisted side of that equation. So even in my time, we had great moral complications. It seems 10 times worse today than it was during my time. Could you recommend service in the military to young people these days? And if not, why not? And if so, what would that mean?
So I always ask and I have a lot of people that come to me, a lot of young people through church and otherwise that come to me, and parents ask those questions. And my simple question is why? Why do you want to serve? What is it you believe that you're doing? And if you believe that you're going to be able to share your faith and carry out your Christian devotion to God in the military environment today, I say, if that's what you think you want to do, that's a lot unlikely. It's very unlikely you're going to be able to do that. Instead, you're going to be going into a mission field, and it's going to be very treacherous. So the question I always ask is why? Why are you doing this? What is it you're seeking to do? Because I cannot recommend military service as a blanket thing at all to young people and to these families that I care about. I just can't do that. There's not trust in leadership. That's the other problem. I think the biggest thing we've seen is military leaders have lost courage, and there is a lack of faith, and there's a huge hit to morale and good order and discipline because of that. Whether it's the withdrawal from Afghanistan, what we see there, we do not have senior leaders in the military today with moral courage to take a stand, to say the right things and do the right things, and take a stand for individual soldiers, Marines, airmen. They're just not willing to do that. It becomes a numbers game. It becomes about politics and getting promoted. And in that environment, we've seen streams of that, but it's worse today. Bureaucracy, being a good bureaucrat is rewarded instead of integrity and fighting for your people. And that's what bothers me more than anything else. I don't trust many military leaders to do what's in the best interest of their soldiers in accomplishing the mission.
Do you see, one of the things I like to point out when we talk about politics, right? So we all go to the voting box, we vote a certain way, and our guy or gal gets into the office or whatever. But like even if whoever controls the White House or Congress, a lot of times we don't see that effect trickle down to places like the Pentagon. I know under the Obama administration, they put a lot of effort into replacing generals there and senior leadership. But I don't think Trump did a lot of that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he changed a lot of that leadership. So that still exists. So that we're seeing the fruit of all of that. Do you see that changing? Let's just say in a 2024 election, everything flips wildly to the other direction. Do you see them flipping all these leaders? It doesn't seem like it happens all that often.
It really doesn't, because it takes 8+ years. It really takes a long time. So, when I first came into the military, it was the Clinton era leaders that were at the top, and it took a while to get them out. And then we sort of did. And then now you're seeing sort of the Obama generation of military leaders that are all too eager. They sort of hid in the background during 4 years of Trump, but now they're all too eager to carry out whatever woke policies they can at this point. So it's sort of right now we're sort of seeing the fruits of Obama's leadership at the Pentagon. That's what I think. That's from my perspective.
And let's go back to another number I was curious about when it came to the mandates is how many, was there an equal application of that mandate with military units? Or were some units kind of like going, yeah, sure, we're getting all over that, and just sort of turning the blind eye and not really following these mandates? So is there a certain number of men and women who kind of made it through? They fell through the cracks. They never got the shot. They weren't really even pressured to do it. So I guess that's my question. Was there an even application of this, or did we see an uneven application across the board?
Unfortunately, very uneven. In the lower enlisted ranks, the Marines pushed very, very hard and moved out first. And the Army was on the other end. The Army was the slowest rollout. So there were Army units. There were, especially in the reserves and the Guard on the Army side, it didn't really hit yet. And the Army was trying to avoid getting sued in federal court. So we didn't even see an injunction come down against the Army because they were moving so slowly. So I think there was not equal application at all, unfortunately. So you have exactly similarly situated Marines and soldiers. The soldiers continue to serve with no adverse action, no significant impact to them. And then you had Marines that were kicked out very quickly.
Yeah, figures the Marines would always try to be first, right? I mean, even in COVID mandates, they want to be first. These Marines, good grief. It is a very troubling thing. I know personally lots of several people in my life who are trying to finish a career in the military or hope to, and it just wasn't, it becomes a very difficult thing, let alone what we talked about a minute ago, which was just the very anti-Christian sentiment that occurs in the military on a day-by-day basis. Again, since we don't see that changing, just how bad do you think this is going to get in the military? Could it get to a place where military members would simply just not even think? I mean, you got about 60 seconds here, but I'm just curious, just how bad could we expect things to get?
Well, we're at a turning point, and it's something I've been praying about and I'm hoping to work on. I mean, we need a revival in the military, just like we need in so many parts of society. So I think that's the real issue. I think if you have strong Christian men and women step up, if you have strong chaplains that step up, if we join together like we did over the mandate and we really push back in thoughtful ways in prayer and just bring the gospel light to the military, I think we can see victory. I think we can see that. So again, when I say mission field about encouraging people to come in or not, that's what I mean. We need to think of military service in that way. We need strong people who understand what they're getting into and are willing to say, you know what, I'm going to take a stand and sacrifice my career.
We are out of time. I'm sorry. R. Davis Younts. Go to younts.law.com. We'll be right back.